Sometimes there are some types of curiosities Romanians get, like how if they haven't really gone out of the continent, because a lot of Romanians are fond of, traveling around Europe and not maybe to other continents such as Africa, or maybe have some sort of different or unrealistic expectations. So I am here to clear up the air, and that is why today's video is gonna be about if Romanians lived in Nigeria. Also, welcome back to my YouTube channel, okay? And if you're new, just welcome. Okay. So just so you know, there are quite a lot of Romanians in Nigeria. That is why over here in Romania, I get very disappointed and very disgusted when they make some types of jokes about Africa, knowing very well that a lot of Romanians literally go to African countries for bigger salaries, Nigeria included, especially back in like the early 2000s. Most of them usually work in, oil companies, refineries, and so on, those kind of jobs. So basically, how has their experiences been? Okay. So far throughout, let's say, my stay in Nigeria, I met at least 20 Romanians who stayed around us as of then. And they would usually say that they really like Nigeria. There is one who is currently in Romania who says that he loves Nigeria. He's always asking the recipe for pepper soup. He's always asking for a special back cream from Nigeria. Can only be found in Nigeria. I'm not sure, but he's always willing to learn, including my mom's, tribal language. So a lot of Romanians in Nigeria, I find them to be very curious, and I don't know if this will, be the same for a lot of um Romanians, in this age, in this generation, because of social media and because of the media in general, a lot of things have been said, which aren't correct about Africa, about a bunch of things, and it brings this mentality that, it's a certain way. Meanwhile, it isn't. I mean, there are some things which are accurate, such as some insecurity problems, which I will mention a part of that later. Something interesting, okay? And yeah, a bunch of other things. Malaria is correct. The sicknesses and all, but one thing that isn't, that I don't understand is Romanians who live there never really suffered any problems of no water, at least the ones I know. You can say portable water, like the ones from tap, but that doesn't mean that you don't really have water. And a lot of them are stained, by crude oil or whatever. So that's a different case. But the way people say it over here in Romania is like no water at all, when we literally stay next to the Atlantic Ocean. So basically, when you stay in Nigeria to Romania, you can live you can live in a normal house. You can drink water, just not from the sink, I think, because you don't know exactly where the water is coming from, or how it's being treated. But you can always buy bottled water, or you buy water, or you can get a dispenser, which a lot of Romanians also do in Romania, because not all Romanians drink from the tap, just the majority of them. A lot of Romanians now are learning some sort of, let's say, disadvantages. Even though they say how clean the water is over here, they still somehow filter it with a filter. So you basically just kind of live normally, depending on where you live as well, of course, because I'm talking about the city, I'm talking about a secured environment, I'm talking about where, there is normal stuff. But if a Romanian decides to live in somewhere that isn't really, let's say, a top estate or camp, that is where they might start a panic. First of all, you will not get steady electricity unless you have solar panels. Okay? Of course, the portable water problem could also happen, but it depends on where you are living. Like I said, another thing that a lot of Romanians would hate is the network, because in Nigeria there are lots of network problems. I don't know exactly the reason why to this actually. So that is one thing they could freak out about. A lot of Nigerians will warn foreigners in general, not just Romanians, about insecurity problems and that they should watch out and not travel without escorts and all that. And the Romanians who I also met there in Nigeria would travel with an escort, just one police most of the time. And I really didn't see much of a difference there. Like, if Nigerians really wanted to do something, I don't think they would be scared of just one police. The Nigeria I know, I don't think so. But there was a time, a period, where my dad had to travel without any escorts. It was just the driver, us to church every Sunday, to places like far in town. And he wasn't the only one. Like, on the highway, you would literally see foreigners driving themselves around, the city with no problem. And some people are just living like this. Some are even living like in a public compound, environments in Nigeria, especially Asians, I think. So yeah, the whole insecurity problem, I don't really understand. I think this whole thing about kidnapping, which is Nigerians' main fear when it comes to foreigners, and because they usually associate foreigners as being very wealthy and so on. But I think it's more of beef when it comes to kidnapping in Nigeria. Like, if somebody just doesn't like you, or yeah, they just really know you have money. I don't really know, but barely hear foreigners getting kidnapped in Nigeria, sincerely speaking. I mean, if you've heard it, I would like to hear the story because I am genuinely curious. Another thing Romanians would freak out might be the food. I mean, in everywhere you go, you can't expect to have the same food as where you grew up. But at the same time, compared to Romania, Nigeria actually has a lot of supermarkets that have foreign ingredients, especially Asian food. But while I was in Nigeria, my dad was able to get like some ingredients for ciorba, for Romanian soup, and a bunch of Romanian dishes. Like, we were legit making salada de boeuf there. We were making ciorba, we were making milky rice, but that's not really, too special. We were making a lot of stuff, okay? Just not sarmale or, any of those very traditional. Like, it was limited, but you could make some dishes, okay? If you knew how to cook, of course. But there was no Romanian restaurants that I knew of. Maybe in bigger cities like Lagos and Abuja, maybe, but I stayed at Port Harcourt, so I didn't. I barely explored myself, just so you know, due to insecurity problems. So one thing that could really interest Romanians, though, is that you will have a lot of things to learn, and it's gonna be like a whole different world from you, okay? Because when you're at home, you're gonna feel like, I'm at home. Then when you open that door, it's like a different universe you have to explore, and there's a lot to explore there in Nigeria. Romanians won't like bad roads. And in many parts of Nigeria, unfortunately, there are bad roads. So that is one thing they might freak out about. And most of all, malaria. Unfortunately, this is not to scare anybody, but my parents would tell me stories of some of their friends who died in Nigeria. They were mostly old. Okay, they were mostly old people for some reason. So I wouldn't really know if it's from old age, but I heard that a guy died from malaria. So malaria can be serious. I mean, if you're new to it and whatever, you see that serious. But if you have it like a lot, you might see it as something like a fever or a cold. At least that's how I saw it. Maybe I was just a kid or something, but for me, I had malaria like every month, literally. I stayed around lots of mosquitoes. And contrary to what one of my teachers once said in class, which was very inaccurate, malaria isn't transmittable, from person to person or whatever. It just stays there, and until you treat it. Of course, it has treatments, there is medicine for it, although they are quite expensive. I heard that they increased in price a lot, probably tripled in price, you know. So basically, the sickness is if you don't have a strong immune system and you don't treat it fast enough or in the best way, I guess, you could unfortunately die from malaria or just get severely ill. Other sicknesses include typhoid if you don't have, good drinking water, or you just taking things which aren't, healthy, not really healthy, but like hygienic. And yeah, I guess those are the main sicknesses that people, or rather Romanians, usually end up getting. Because when they leave the country, either they just feel, home again, Romania, or they just have those moments when they miss it. Like there's this Romanian guy who is always posting about Nigeria and he just misses it, okay? So basically, one thing that a lot of foreigners do love about Nigeria, the people, it depends on who they meet. Of course, that is everywhere in the world. I'm talking about locals around, okay? Because one thing about Nigerians is that they are very generous people. They're very generous. They're very, I don't know, like especially to foreigners. And unfortunately, this is also how a lot of people tend to take advantage of them, which I think is really wrong because I once really find a lot of people around the world who take this hospitality something, to the extremes like them. Like it's always been like that. And Nigerians in general can be really friendly. I'm not talking about when you go and meet scammers or when you go and meet, the wrong crowd, especially in bars and clubs and all that, like I'm talking about people, okay? Good people. So that's basically all for today for how a Romanian's experience in Nigeria could be and how they are, um even now and when I left. So if you watched to the end, I want to say a huge thank you, and please consider subscribing if you haven't. If you know someone who's curious and needs this video, feel free to share it to them. Bye bye and stay tuned.